I was self-righteous in my apologies a lot of times. Um, there was a point where, because I was so big on forgiving and moving on and for the greater good, I wanted to hurry up and get the apology over with. Hey y'all, it's Shawana Stevens with the Well Network, and this is the Life and Podcast, because you know life be lifing. Hey y'all. Hey y'all, it's Shawana Stevens with the Life and Podcast. Hey y'all.
All right. So let's talk about apology. Are you a person that needs an apology in order to move forward?
I feel like an element of myself wants an apology every time, for closure. But I do understand that there are situations where you will not get an apology, and I'm learning how to deal with that. I think as a person, first of all, who doesn't want an apology? Everybody wants an apology. Like, um, yeah, I think people, you need that, but I think in some cases you're just not going to get it, and you got to be okay with knowing that.
So you seem you a person that deserves apology. That's what you saying?
First of all, we're not talking about deserve. We're talking about do you need or want. And I feel like, yes, everybody wants an apology. There are times when I feel like I need an apology to move forward. Do I feel like I deserve it? I feel like a dog is due an apology if it's necessary. Like, I mean, why would you not want to? And actually, I think that's a personal flaw to not give what is needed, um, especially if you are a Christian.
So speaking of being a Christian, we know that the Christian way is to apologize. But what about the apology that isn't necessarily warranted, but you still feel like you have to do it? Does that change your motive in the way that you apologize?
I think, well, since you said a Christian, I think that there is no room for a Christian to feel like an apology is not needed. I think as Christians, there are so many scriptures that I can pull on that talks about just having compassion, being able to, if you offend someone, you just have to get it right. And so I just don't. I think if a person sounds like they feel like they need an apology, I feel like you should give it just because of who you are. Um, that's my thought process.
Now, what is
And
the
you said, how is it given? Does that change
yeah, does
how
it
you,
change how it's given because you
mm-mm.
don't necessarily feel that?
Yeah, you shouldn't. I think if you are truly a Christian, you should not ever feel that way. Um, your natural self, you should be able to put aside, because you know that that person needs it. And if they feel like they need it, you have to give it.
Okay.
That's part of being selfless.
So in that being selfless,
That's also part of submission.
oh look at that. In that, in that, that you mentioned being selfless, being that you're married, right? And let's say you and your husband get into a disagreement.
Hmm.
How important or what does the apology mean to you when you're in those intense moments?
What does apology mean to me, to receive it
Yes, like
or
how
to give it?
powerful, both, how powerful is it to give that apology and receive that apology from your spouse?
I think, man, this year is 10 years that we've been married. I think we have learned, we have collectively come to a realization that an apology can make or break you, especially in relationships. And there have been seasons where we've had disagreements or we've had situations, and we may not have um, realized our wrong, but years later or months later, we'll recognize and give the apology, and it'll unlock something that's really divine. And so I think um, when you are in relationship, when you are intimate, of course, we've heard the people that are closest to you have the potential of hurting you the most. But when you don't receive the apology, it keeps you locked up and bound. Especially when in your mind you needed them to know that they were wrong. I think a lot of people are walking around thinking thinking that people have wronged them, but because the person hasn't acknowledged it, they are bound because they don't believe that the person understands. It's almost like the person doesn't recognize your hurt. And so because of that, you are stuck. And I think it's important um, I do believe that it's important for us to receive those apologies and those acknowledgments, because it can unlock something in you. But I've also understood, even in marriage, that there are some times where, we can't control the way a person thinks or the way that a person processes information. And so, I've learned, even in my relationship with the Lord, that um, there are times where God is patient with me because I haven't come to certain realizations. I've read the word frontwards and backwards, but there are some things that just don't hit yet. And God is patient, He's gracious, and He gives us the time that we need for us to actually come to the realization. And so, in those seasons where you're waiting for the person to come to the realization, I think it's important for you to have a relationship with the Lord, because even though that apology hasn't unlocked, that it hasn't unlocked you for you to be released from that hurt. Your relationship, what a man will not do, God can sometimes do for you. And I think that's important. You got to have that open line of communication with God, because sometimes He will give you a revelation about the other person's inability to recognize, that could actually unlock something in you. I had to realize there was a situation, and if you really know my story, there's some stuff that happened in my past where someone stole like some money from me, and it was a large sum of money from me, right? Um, and I could never get closure on that situation. But what I had to understand is that, my inability to forgive without the apology was a sin in itself. And I think that's a big part too, that sometimes we don't actually preach messages about, but it is true that your ability to not forgive, your inability to forgive, even when you don't have an apology, is actually you missing the mark.
My next question was actually going to be, what is your take on um, the process from the process that it takes from apologizing to forgiving and forgetting? Like, what is that process, or how should that process go?
I think for myself, first I'm gonna be human, and so I'm gonna be mad. Um, but I think also when you have a relationship with the Lord and you desire to be right in His eyesight, you do always examine yourself. And so there's a portion of myself that when I'm mad, I still have to reflect on me, especially if you live a life of worship. Like, there's a point where in your being mad at somebody else, the tables will turn and you'll start recognizing yourself if you live a life of worship. And I think, um, for me, when I am mad, I immediately switch back to myself. In my seeing that person, sometimes I can always see me. And I think that puts me in a place of grace so that I can forgive the other person. And so a lot of times I end up apologizing when I'm right because, um, the focus has changed. My focal point has changed. And I think for me, that's a lot of times, I was pondering yesterday over a situation because I felt like I didn't get closure in it. And I felt like I was done wrong. But in the process of that, I stopped thinking about the other person. I was like, you know what? I need to contact this person, because I see another perspective and I want to make sure that they understand, because this could possibly be what they need so that they can give me what I need. And I think sometimes that's another dynamic that we don't think about as Christians. Sometimes we can't get what we need until we give the other person what they need.
So, serial, serial apologizers, people who apologize too much. Explain what the different components of that, because it's two sides of that, and I want to
Mm-hmm.
see if you're gonna we're gonna talk about both sides, but it's two sides to over apologizing.
I can talk for myself. I remember myself being a person that um, I was self righteous in my apologies a lot of times. Um, there was a point where, because I was so big on forgiving and moving on and for the greater good, I wanted to hurry up and get the apology over with. Like, let me hurry up and give you what you need so we can move on because we got work to do. And in that, I was apologizing with the wrong spirit, not the wrong motives, but the wrong spirit. My motive was to get past. My motive was to give you what you need. My motive was to make sure that we acknowledge what I did wrong and what I could have done better. But the spirit in which I was doing it was wrong because I wasn't trying to sit in that space, own it, and make sure you were okay. I just was trying to get past. And I think that's one element. And so when you find yourself in that space, like, just throwing them apologies out just to throw them back, I feel like when you find yourself in that space, you got to go back to the why and make sure that you sit in the why. Sometimes people just need to know that you're sorry. Not that you acknowledge, but that you really feel the apology, for them to receive it. And I think that's important. Being able to sit in it long enough for yourself to be uncomfortable. Sometimes we run away from uncomfortable spaces, but sometimes we have to sit in it so the other person, can get the healing. There's a healing that happens when you are really sorry, for the other person and you.
I want to talk about the manipulative apology. What's your let's talk about that. What's your take on that?
So I'm gonna be honest. Um, No, I'm not gonna be honest. I can't be honest. I can't be honest right here. But I think Jesus might come and flip the table over if I'm honest right here. So let me just do it differently. Let me say, um, there is a type of person that would apologize. Um, I think you said it earlier. Apologize from an insecurity. Like, I just want you to like me. Oh, I hate that you're upset with me, or I don't like this. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Just whatever I gotta do. Let me just let you know I'm sorry. That's whack. But it also comes from a place of, um, I'm apologizing because I need, right? Because I need to feel better. And so is it really genuine? Or I need something from you, so let me apologize so I can hurry up and get back on your good side so I can get what I need. That's also another aspect as well. And again, it goes back to motive. It goes back to the spirit in which it's done. Um, and to be honest, in those spaces, um, is you never really get the God thing out of it. You know what I mean? Like when flesh is there, you don't really get the God thing. And I think there are a lot of situations suffering because, the people said I'm sorry. They went through the motions and did the apology and all that kind of stuff like that, but, um, God went in it, and the spirit of God could not do what He needed to do, in it. So that's one thing. Um, I will say this though. I do want to say this, and I'm not sure if this was one of your questions, but, um, I also was the person that was, because this is actually something that I'm dealing with now. I have learned how to move on from an apology, but everyone has not done that. And there are times and people in my life that constantly remind me now, hey, that's where you at. You can move on. But, I need a minute. And I think sometimes when we are apologizing and when we have mastered the art of apologies, it is important to understand that you don't get to dictate how the other person receives the apology. um, you have to be sensitive to the fact that they may need time to process what you said. And it doesn't mean that they won't ever process it. It just means that they're just in the space of processing right now. Like we all have dealt with our phone and we're trying to like download an app and it's steady downloading. Like it's not finished yet. It's gonna get to complete, but it just hasn't gotten there yet. And I think sometimes, especially when you deal with rejection, it's hard to understand that um, it's gonna feel uncomfortable until they get to complete. Um, but it could very well be the desired effect that you want if you just let it marinate for a minute. So, and take yourself out of it. If you're truly gonna apologize, you do have to take yourself out of it. Once you've released that apology, you have to have confidence enough in God to know that if you did it with the right spirit, it's gonna work. So you gotta take yourself out of it. And I think it's a selfish person to want the desired results before the cake is finished baking, right? So I think that's another aspect of it. When you are apologizing, it is a certain amount of humility and selflessness. Um, but you also have to see that selflessness all the way through until that person is able to come back and say, you know what, I'm good. And we want things to go back to the way that they were before the apology happened. Sometimes that takes time.
Yeah, the rubber band has been extended and it will not go back. I understand that.
I don't know that it will never go back because I think true forgiveness means that it will, right? I think that's the greatest misconception in the body of Christ. True forgiveness is that it goes back to the way that it was. Like I can't treat you a certain kind of way because we had this mishap, because that means that I haven't actually forgiven you. So it does have to go back. We just got to work on figuring out how to maneuver back. And I think people don't stick in the fight long enough to get things the way that they used to be. I think that's true forgiveness, though.
Okay. So as we wrap up, what would you say by way of encouragement to the person who feels like apologizing makes them look weak?
um, my philosophy is that a strong person is one um, that is silent when necessary, that is that uses restraint when necessary. A strong person um, can withhold a lot, and I know there are misconceptions with that because people don't want to be strong anymore. But but it's true. I mean, it's you have to be able to um, you got to be able to be resilient. You got to be able to bounce back. And so when you apologize, um, you are putting yourself in a vulnerable state. And there are so many people who are too prideful to do that. And so to be able to do something that so many people cannot um, is strength in itself, and is a victory. We're talking about victories today, but that's a victory in itself. So you are never weak to apologize. Um, I, I always say the coward is the person that cannot be vulnerable. Um, because if it was easy, everybody would do it. But the fact that everyone cannot is an indication that that is where the strength lies. Um, so that's my thought. So I want to say to all of the people who have a problem with apologizing, like, first of all, if you are that person that you know you're wrong, but you buy a candy bar, or you try to just make them laugh, knowing good and well you're wrong, hey, we see you. We see you. Like, we know you can't apologize. But I want you to understand that being able to apologize gives you a power that few people are able to actually acquire, and that is the power to change situations and environments. Stay up.